Hello, my name is Austin Fire, and I'm back again. I'm back to talk about, back to talk about these, all four of them, all at once, in combination, in totality. Anyway, alright, so we're going to talk about the heritage of Shannara, and I gotta tell you right now, I really loved it. It was, gosh, I remember it less well than a lot of the others. Ironically, the only books I really remember were Druid and Elfstones, literally, or not Elfstones, Elf Queen even. My least favorite and my favorite probably book in the 4-book series. But I definitely forgot like lots of details out of it, but I very much enjoyed rereading this series. It was an excellent way to follow up the the sort of Shannara trilogy. It was a very effective follow-up, because I mean, I would argue that those first 3 books were very much classic high fantasy in a lot of ways. There's a lot of elements of it that just made it feel very, very high fantasy, right? Whereas this one subverts your expectations a little bit. It's not anything dramatic, but I'm not even sure if it subverts your expectations. But what it does is that it's not fantasy in the same vein as the Sword or the Elfstones or the Wish Song. It's not in the same broad patterns, I guess, as those. It feels different. It feels distinctly different. The idea that things have changed so dramatically in the land, it doesn't feel quite so fantasy-ish, with the Federation and the creepers and so forth. There's a lot of elements that start to kind of take a different turn. Take a different turn from what had come before, and it's very enjoyable in that way. As I just said, obviously my favorite book out of the series was the Elf Queen of Shannara, and my least favorite was the Druid of Shannara. With details of which I kind of I guess I never really talked about the fact that Elf Queen is my favorite. That's because my favorite could only be determined after reading Talismans. Of course, Talismans could have been my least favorite too, but that's not really how it worked out, is it? It's just overall, it's just really good. I really love it. I really enjoyed it. I'm not sure what approach to take with this video, because there is a lot of things I kind of want to talk about, and I also probably going to forget a bunch of them too. But I guess first things first, I kind of really want to talk about what I really enjoyed, I guess. Because the thing is that I do have some interesting criticisms I want to go through, but I don't want to just talk about the things I'm critical of. Then again, those are the things I have most present in my mind, so I think maybe I'll just start with them and we'll see where this goes. So one of the things okay, so there's this one thing that kind of really bothers me. That really bothers me from Talismans, and that is the Elven Defense of the Westland. And this actually goes back to First King, and it goes back to Elfstones as well. So I guess we'll establish something here. One of the things that we definitely know is that there is advanced engineering in the Four Lands, right? Tircis is very well fortified. At one point, the Elfich existed. The 7 defense, I think it was 7 defensive gates on the western side of Arborlawn. You have all sorts of, Paranor exists. You have all sorts of, you have the existence of advanced engineering in the Four Lands. And yet, for some reason, you don't have anything remotely resembling siege engineering. You have a little bit of it. In First King especially, we see that, the armies of the Warlock Lord have things like siege towers and stuff. And in the Talismans, you also have things like the shield, like the large battlefield, I guess, shields or whatever. Yeah, what would you call them? Like little barricades? I don't know. they're like defensive shields, you know, that they push along to protect themselves from arrows. But the thing that bothers me is that there's never a more we never get to see advanced siege engineering, even though in a universe, first of all, that exists after our own. So the knowledge and information to create, you know, like siege weapons and so forth should already exist, right? But on top of that is just the fact that at this point, you know, it's been 3,000 years since our era, so why in the world, and they've created these massive fortifications, so why in the world have they not invented things like ballista and trebuchets? Or reinvented, I guess would be the word. You know, like, and this is, I like Terry Brooks' battlefield tactics, but I don't like the way he completely ignores things like siege engineering. Like, why? Why is there, you know, like, why? You know, I think it's very silly. Because the elves, of course, are severely outnumbered by the Federation army, right? I think it's like 10-1. And I think the implication, if I read it correctly, is like the elves have like a army about 6,000, and the Federation has an army which implies the Federation's army about 60,000, plus creepers. Plus they have creepers. And yet the only time we see the employment of any sort of siege weapon is in the first book at the Jut, where they use that ballista to protect themselves against the creeper. And I mean, it doesn't defeat the creeper, but it helps. And the question is, why aren't there more things like this? More, for that matter, why aren't the elves better at fortifying their own city? You know, we see it in First King as well, where they try the exact same defensive ploy, basically, where they sally out and try to harass the enemy army that severely outnumbers them, and then they fall back into the more defensible Valley of Ren. So my question is, why isn't the Valley of Ren more heavily fortified? Why do they only rely on it as a natural defense rather than, I don't know, posting walls or fortresses or just defensive towers, guard towers along the length of the valley to be used as a force multiplier for the outnumbered elves? You know, why don't they have fortifications on which they can place ballista? Now you might say here, but the elves have been gone for 100 years. Of course they don't have any defenses. But you know what they would have if they had built defenses hundreds of years ago? Ruined defenses, which is better than nothing at all. If they had like the same principle as the Elfish or like defenses of Gondolin, if they had like a series of walls built along the length of the Valley of Ren, guess what? They would have positions that they could place siege engines in. They would have positions they could hide behind and shoot from and stab from behind. Right? They would have all these things they could use, but they don't exist. What? Like, what? Really? I mean, I think it's funny. I also think it's funny that, like, so the Elfish is apparently still in ruins. It says, the book says it. The Elfish is still basically in ruins from when it was destroyed by the demon assaults in the Elfstones of Shannara. And so again, you're kind of like, what? Like, again, even if everything had fallen into disrepair and ruin and everything, there would still be something there that they could use for their defenses. And it's just none. It's just a matter of throwing their army into battle. And that's something else that kind of throws me off. Why does it take Barsim and Iridio like 2 weeks to mobilize the Elven army? You surely would think that while they're in the Lodin, they would mobilize themselves. You know, they would mobilize their army and have it ready to go, you know, just for defensive purposes, since they know that they're not exactly welcome back in the Four Lands because of the Federation. You would think that they would already be mobilized and ready to go, and, you know, and I mean, that would be a perfect excuse to, like, set up some defenses in the Valley of Ren. Instead of mobilizing your army, you instead have your army engaging in some light / heavy engineering work to protect the valley. But instead, no, they're just kind of, they're mobilizing the army for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. So Ren has to send, you know, has to lead out a force of 1,000 men to try and hold off 60,000. I think that's hilarious and bizarre, because it's just like there's a lot of like strategic considerations that Terry Brooks apparently did not consider when writing his book, and it kind of hampers the overall plausibility of the scenario. But on the whole, I do enjoy the actual warfare and the actual fighting, and I I love Ren's solution to dealing with the initial force of creepers, having them be dealt with by those creatures in the swamp. You know, I think that's really clever. I think it's a good way to utilize something that had been established before in a new and inventive way. I think that was really good. I think it was really clever. I really enjoyed it. On the whole, I enjoy the strategy in the Talismans of Shannara, in no small part because, for what it is, despite its failings, despite the fact that Terry Brooks apparently does not know that siege engines are a thing, that siege weapons, that siege artillery, I should say more precisely, are a thing, that overall the strategy and tactics are very smart, and are the sorts of things that a inferior force would use to try and keep a superior force off balance. I think it's very clever. The idea of using surprise attacks, night attacks, just that sort of thing. I think is really smart. But then of course it comes down to an actual like straight up knockdown confrontation at the very end, and of course it doesn't quite work out. And of course that works about as that works out about quite as well as you would expect, and that is, the elves start taking heavy casualties, start getting pushed back, etc. I think that's I think that's very I think it's very good. And then of course the Freeborn show up with their army. The army actually does show up with the trolls and everything, and they outflank the Federation and push them back, for a day. Lots of things, even though no, there's no even though there. Never mind. Abort, cancel what I was going to say there, because there was nothing to say there. But that leads into my other major kind of criticism of the Talismans. I'm actually talking about Talismans a lot, but it harkens back more to other things in the series, which is why I'm talking about it here instead of in that video. And that is the Deus Ex Machina at the end of the story. Because of course at the end of the story, Walker Bow leads the rest of our heroes in an assault on the Shadowin Keep at Southwatch. And of course, underneath, they discover that the Shadowin have been stealing the magic of the land, which is causing the sickening of the land, and the land's dying and everything. And it's been trapped into a sort of glowing light that's chained up underneath Southwatch. And when they free that light, the light is unleashed and it destroys all the Shadowin. It destroys the Shadowin, destroys the creations like the creepers, destroys Southwatch, and it restores the land all in one fell swoop. And as I said, it's a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, honestly. It's a bit, because obviously it saves the Allied army in the West from being utterly destroyed because Federation soldiers watch the Seekers and Creepers be destroyed, and they panic and flee the field. They just quit the field entirely, right? And I just think that's kind of cheap, truth be told. I think it's kind of a cheap approach to finishing it. I mean, there was no choice. He kind of backed himself into a corner because the Federation forces are insurmountably large, the Shadowin are insurmountably powerful, so he needs something to get rid of them, and it's the magic of the land, that basically. And I just think that's an underwhelming approach to solving the problems of the world. I think that they could have. I feel like there could have been a better approach to that problem. I just don't know what it is. I think it's just kind of scaling things down a little bit. Make the Shadowin not quite so insurmountable, I mean, obviously the Shadowin can be killed by taking catastrophic damage when they're not in their Shadowin forms. One of the Shadowin that Morgalia ambushes when he saves Ren, when she's being taken to Southwatch is crushed to death under a wagon. So obviously they can be killed by more mundane means, not just by magical means. But I think maybe toning that down a little bit and making it so that, you cut them enough, stab them enough, they'll die, and that also makes Damson and Maddie in the raid on Southwatch more capable and able to handle that fight, right? And you also have, you know, and you just make it, you know, you also have the creepers. You know, you make the creepers a little more able to be dealt with. You know, like again, I mean, because I mean they do. Actually, how did they beat it at the judge? Do they just overpower it after taking a lot of casualties? I think so, right? You know, I think those are just viable approaches right there. There's something on my floor that apparently fell ages ago and I didn't even realize it. But yeah, I feel like first of all the magic being trapped at the bottom of Southwatch needs to be set up a little better. Part of it is that like it's hinted at in Druid and Elf Queen, but it's not really addressed until Talismans, and I feel like just a stronger hint that it exists would have been so much better. Rather than just it's like, oh, this is a thing that exists, you know, that exists at the tail end of everything, you know. Yeah, it's introduced more clearly very late, and I feel like maybe if, like, I don't know, Cole when he was in prison at Southwatch had gotten some inkling to what it was, its nature, you know, so that he can bring in, you know, so he can bring some knowledge to the table after he escapes Southwatch and is freed from the madness of the Mirror Shroud. I think that would have been smarter. Make it so that Walker is more aware of. Make it so that Walker is more aware of the existence of the magic. You know, he doesn't know because he hasn't seen it, but he's aware of it. And then, like, it's like Cole comes in with more information, and then Walker uses that to conclude that that's what's going on. That's why the land is dying. We need to do something about this. And it also gives him more impetus to. I think that also gives more impetus and logic for like Walker to go to Southwatch in the first place and run into Morgan. You know, to run into Morgan and join up with the rest of them. You know, and then to attack Southwatch. It's not just Par, and it's not just that he's aware of something beneath Southwatch. But there's something going on and he's more aware of it. I feel like he should be more aware of it anyway. He should be able to, in some way, sense the magic flowing into the earth or flowing out of the earth into Southwatch. I feel like that would be very logical for him to know. Instead of just introducing this concept very, very late into the story and having it magically save everyone. You know, it just needed a little more. It's not even that much of a problem. It's just need a little more to grasp onto. And it would be great as opposed to just good. You know? Because like I said, it's a Deus Ex Machina solution, and it definitely doesn't work as well as it should. But on the whole, overall, though, and you know, I mean, I have my complaints here, obviously, but I think it's an overall fantastic story. I love how the books start with everyone's kind of just normal and mundane, you know. Par's version of the Wish Song is just like Jer's version of the Wish Song, and then it evolves and gets kind of complicated and dangerous, and it's scary. And I like how it all evolves. I like how it moves. And I also very much like the idea that the magic is dangerous. I like the idea that the Wish Song getting out of control is scary to Par, and he doesn't want to use it. I like how the magic of the Sword of Leah is scary, and he doesn't, you know, and Morgan doesn't want to use it. And by the way, Morgan is by far my favorite Leah, and I think that's going to stay true for the rest of the series. Morgan is absolutely a fun character. I like his angst about his desire to do more to deal with the Federation and the Shadowin. I love how he's determined and how he always, you know, how he keeps throwing himself into danger even when it's not the best idea, but it's possibly the only choice he has. You know, the way he keeps showing up in the final raid on Southwatch is just fantastic, honestly. You know, it's I very much enjoy it. And again, I hate how his character's kind of weakened by the poor romance between him and Quickening, but how he's enhanced by his romance with Maddie Rowe. I think it makes him a very strong and very compelling character, and I really very much enjoy his presence in the story. You know, and who else was it? And of course, Walker's own consternation about the magic, you know, about how he doesn't want to be manipulated by the druids. But then he kind of realizes towards the end that it's like, okay, all this knowledge and information that Al-Anon had is actually kind of a curse. You know, being able to know things and being able to interpret things, it's kind of a curse. And he realizes that, yes, the druids are manipulative, but they're manipulative for a reason. You know, again, we see another story where Al-Anon doesn't tell everyone the whole truth, because if they know the whole truth, then it will hamper their ability to actually do what needs to be done. You know, if they realize that the Sword of Shannara is a talisman meant for Cole Omsford, and then Par later on, then they don't approach the problems that they're going to encounter in the right way, and it might all backfire, right? Again, I think that's fine. You also have Ren. Ren, of course, being fearful of the magic of the Elfstones, and all of them lose, except for Walker, because Walker is older and he's more mature and he understands the nature of the magic. All of them lose control of their magic at some point. It all kind of takes them over, and they start doing crazy and chaotic things. You know, I mean, I'm most notably remembering Morgan fighting the Seekers and the Federation soldiers in Tyrsis as they're trying to escape with Padishar, and you know, he loses control and actually destroys the warehouse they're in, you know, with a remarkable burst of magic, and it takes Maddie bringing him back, you know, to save him. And of course, you have the same thing happen later on with Damson and Par, where Par's, you know, losing control, and you know, Damson brings him back. And to that regard, I also, again, except for Morgan and Quickening, I really like the romances in this one. There's only two. There are only two others. There's Damson and Par. There's Damson Rhea and Par Omsford, and you know, Maddie Rowe and Morgan Leah. And I very much enjoy those. I very much enjoy those relationships. I very much like how they grow. And as part of the reason that they work so well is because they grow through hardship. They grow through their challenges and their not tragedies, but they go, you know, they grow through challenge. They grow through the difficulties they face together. And it's very natural and it's very understandable, and it's the kinds of relationships that Terry Brooks writes really well. In fact, I've been thinking about it, and I think part of the reason that Quickening and Morgan doesn't work very well is because at no point does Quickening need Morgan. Not really. She's very capable on her own. And while she doesn't like really defend herself, and she does need people at her side protecting her, at the same time, you never get the sense that either A, she is afraid, or B, that you never get the sense that A, Quickening is afraid, and you never get the sense that B, that that she's ever truly helpless. We needed a moment where Morgan actually like deliberately helped her. Like deliberately and explicitly helped her on something she didn't know or she didn't understand, or that she didn't, you know, just something she didn't fully grasp. You know, some sort of physical danger that Morgan was more capable of helping her with than she was. And I mean, there's little moments like that, but nothing major that draws them together and, you know, makes it obvious that they catch feelings for one another. You know, make it so that maybe Quickening, knowing her mission, is more reluctant to embrace Morgan Leah, and then when she finally does, you know, it's out of a need and a desire to be more than what she is, as opposed to, you know, it sort of just happens, you know. Like I said, the love between them is mostly just a puppy love. It's just a little thing, you know. It's just a little thing that really doesn't have any sort of oomph behind it, you know. And I wish it had more to it, because with two other very good romances in the series, it's underwhelming that it's kind of underwhelming that very pivotal one is less impactful than it should be. Trying to think, is there anything else I want to talk about from the series as a whole, or related to the rest of the series? I feel like not really. I feel like not really. I feel like I never fully completed my thoughts on siege weapons in Shannara, or more precisely the lack thereof. Because it's just because generally speaking, I'm just bothered by the fact that, you know, that forces, that people that are outnumbered and outmatched are never using superior tools to like protect themselves, you know? You know, the bare minimum, you would think that like ballista would be extremely common in the Four Lands, you know? You think they would be. It's not like they're like devastating weapons, but they'd be super effective in certain scenarios. You know, they would just be super effective in certain scenarios, and I just think that it's like you think that they would be utilized in. You think they'd just be utilized after, you know, all these years. You know, the first ballista were invented 6,000. You know, like probably 5,500 years earlier. You know, and you think they would just be like, they would crop up again. No, I'm hung up on ballista because they just seem like the most practical weapon to make. You know, maybe trebuchets are a little beyond them or something, or even regular catapults would be a little beyond them. But, you know, even accounting for that, I just feel like there needs to be a little more depth in the sieges. Anyway, all right, I think I am done for now. If I've forgotten anything, I'll probably write in the comments after I finished editing this video. But anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed it. There'll be a little bit more delay between me talking about the next book, which will be the Voyage of the Gerald Shannara. I'm going to do that series next. There's going to be a little bit of delay though, because I only just got to order them yesterday, because I was having issues accessing my Barnes & Noble account. But I finally got around to it. And then I also ordered The Word in the Void. But I'm debating whether I'm going to read that first, or if instead I'm going to read, or if I'm instead going to move on first to, whatchamacallit? High Druid of Shannara, which is the logical conclusion to the Voyage of the Gerald Shannara, because of course it continues the story of Grianne Omsford. I'm debating that, and I'll probably come to it when I'm at the end of the Voyage of the Gerald Shannara. Because I'm going to have to buy it all anyway in the end anyway, right? So it doesn't matter which order I have them in. Because if I want to read it in publication order, actually I would actually read The Word in the Void first, I believe. And then I would read Voyage, and then I would read Genesis, and then I would read Legends, and then I would read High Druid. But I almost want to complete the story of complete the primary story of Grianne Omsford first, and then come back around and read all the prequels, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And I'll be back next time with who knows what content. I don't even know. I don't know what I'm making anymore. Anyway, until next time, everybody.